Present here from both departments, DCOG and DOD. I've been introduced. My name is Thembi, Nkadimeng, and good morning again to members of the media from various media houses. While launching, as the program director has also indicated, and the purpose why we have invited you is a memorandum of collaboration between ourselves as the Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, whose functions, amongst others, is to ensure and manage the Disaster Management Act of South Africa and look into collaborative ways and systems, terms of reference and all that may be necessary to assist during the time of any form of disaster. So let me first thank all of you for making it this morning to witness this collaboration. As you may be aware, there are two key components in managing of the disaster. Is disaster reduction, and it includes mitigation and planning and all that on how you really have to reduce and prevent. And then there's disaster, hence it's usually called DRR. It's your disaster reduction and response mechanism or strategy or framework that, according to the Paris Accord, each and every country is supposed to form and have. Because disaster knows no time, no boundary, no announcement, nothing. It happens. And we are all alive now to the climatic change conditions and the inclement weather conditions globally, but also it's a nightmare for us here at home. And there are provinces which are more prone to droughts, floods, veld fires, and many other disasters. And then you also have a component of disasters which are man-made, human form of disaster, which we also have to respond to. Fresh in our mind are three disasters, if you have followed, and I know you did. Just day before, so yesterday there was a wall that broke in a building in Palito. It's not a natural disaster, it's a man-made disaster. It's at a construction. We are coming from George. Just immediately, or 3 days or so after the building of George collapsed, we had a disaster in Solplaki municipality where municipal workers were responding to electrical power connection failure, and we lost about 4 or 5 municipal employees in that incident. So there are these form of disasters that the team will definitely, at the end of it all, ensure that the devastation is minimal as possible, doesn't happen in terms of how we plan and put our frameworks in place, but we save communities, including livelihoods of people and even animals in some instances where cruelty of nature also extends beyond human beings. So we've witnessed quite a number of such activities, and we also recognize that it is important that we then mitigate climate change. There are instruments, there are measures worldwide. For example, we have got one of the best South African weather service systems in the country with regard to early warning. Gets to be communicated openly. You assist as media houses as well in communicating. The response is what becomes our responsibility in terms of warning people, evacuations where necessary. If you compare the floods of KwaZulu-Natal in January compared to the floods of April last year, government response was very much better. If you look into the last building major collapse that we had, was a bridge here just below Greyston, entering Sentin, and the collapse that we had in George. In George, in 2 hours, almost all the teams. The furthest fire specialist was arriving from Northwest in Rustenburg municipality. But in 2 hours after the building has collapsed, in 16 hours, 34, our first major report, first main report was released on how the response teams will be. So we're enhancing that work. And we all know that defense, through its training in the army, they're the best in terms of assisting. Our municipal systems also are still poor. You know, we get allocated the funds in response to disaster, and spending is a challenge. And collaboration of today is also to deal quickly on how the departments could be able to be of assistance under the National Disaster Management Center. As a department of COGTA as well, we run our community works program, and we focus on mobilizing the public and the private sector into partnerships on how to respond. And we're channeling our community works programs now, and the teams that we have, over 200,000 people who will then be training as part of what the collaboration with defense will be assisting us to do, to ensure that we explore on how do we maximize on dealing with, for example, storm drainage in townships and all that, so that during rainy seasons, it just does not create another hazard where children in some instances die because there isn't proper drainage system in our municipal road, and they will be assisting us. So we are going to utilize their defense capabilities to safeguard our nation, but also oversee that the South African Forces Institute, which manages emergency strategic reserve and procurement from the Department of Defense, also come into our shores as COGTA and assist and make sure that they give guidance and we become better. And in our planning, we'll then create a disaster reserve assurance fund, which will jointly be operated by our emergency operations centers, which will be having the disaster management centers and the defense, and we will be creating disaster integrated industrial parks, where we now have disaster response storage of issues that we need and material that is needed from each and every district. You know, we have got 44 districts with 8 metros, which makes them 52. So that is what we will try and do our industrial parks. Yes, we specialize. For example, the police in K9, if you want the best swimmers for search and rescue, Mudimule will give you that in Limpopo. If you want the best fire specialist in the municipality, Rustenburg, City of Cape Town, will give you that. But you need to be able to have all those districts, meaning the 52 centers of local municipalities and metros, to be able to maintain and manage their own fire. They need to have the capability, they need to have the utensils to do that. I think in short, that's what we are coming here to avail to you and share with our nation, that we get better every day in terms of how we're going to be responding, and we'll be collaborating with the Department of Defense to ensure that we manage our disaster in terms of mitigation and response much better. Thank you very much, Minister Modise, as well, for joining us to ensure that we become better in saving our citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. We will therefore move to our next item, which is the symbolic signing of the memorandum of collaboration between the Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs and the Department of Defense. After that, then we'll take questions, and then there will be replies from the ministers and the senior managers. Okay, thank you very much, ministers.
Assigned, I left it there.
All right, colleagues, you will appreciate that there is an inherent operating procedure that you normally use of raising your hand, indicate your name and the media house where you come from before you ask a question. And I will appreciate if you can use that particular system so that we have a proper and structured engagement in terms of question and answer session. I will therefore open the floor for questions, and the respective ministers, Secretary of Defense, the head of CWP and the NDMC and other senior managers will be able to interchangeably assist where necessary in terms of answering to the questions that are raised. With a show of hands, colleagues. My brother from newsroom.
Good afternoon, ministers. Zeno from Newsroom Africa. I've got a couple of questions. The first one would be in terms of financing of the disaster management centers. Is there, are we going to have money that's aside and already available for disasters, especially to ensure that the operations run smoothly? And then is there clear responsibilities between the two departments in terms of how defense can aid and how COGTA is going to handle some stuff? So is there a clear line in the memorandum that defines who must do what? And thirdly, the turnaround time from municipalities to get the necessary response or help they need from national government when there is a disaster. I remember in the Eastern Cape, I'm not sure the name of it, Port St. John's, when there was that disaster. So are there clear time frames now in terms of if a disaster hits over the weekend, national government is always able to respond with the necessary responses within the particular time frame? So I'm just talking about the delay in terms of determining whether this can be a disaster or not and what type of assistance is needed for that community. So those are the questions I have for now. Thank you. It's for both ministers, or anyone can answer.
Thank you. Do we have another question? Okay, ministers.
Good morning. Your first question is around financing. Is there financing? I'm going to leave that for Minister COGTA. But coming into the second one, are the tasks different? They are different, they are coordinated. Defense is like the government's pantry. All departments dip in, but sometimes there are not the resources that go with the skill sets that reside in defense. In this particular instance, we also have been looking at the changing patterns, not only in South Africa's climate. We've looked at what has been happening. If you remember, in the past, the disasters looked to be up there in the north. Recently, we have seen that the south is getting its fair. If you look at what happened in Brazil, that means that we need to get better organized to deal with disasters, especially from the oceans. We intend, after we have finished with our defense review, to have a structure that is deliberate, that trains for, that concentrate on the different needs in terms of disaster within the defense. That is the structure that will be on standby, that will be used in conjunction with the Department of COGTA, because disasters happen amongst communities. And therefore, you do need to have some rapid response from somewhere, which would be working hand in hand with the structures within COGTA and within the rest of government to do that. The third partner in this relationship will be Treasury. They are on board. And yes, I think the Minister will deal with the issues of finance, but we are hoping that when we start our structure of training deliberately for disaster management within defense, that we will have resources that will be able to enable us to nitpick, to decide on which trainings we want to upgrade amongst the members of the defense. It is also important for us to have the relationship with Treasury, because that structure will not necessarily be made up of full-time Defence Force members. Our defense reserves will play a bigger part in it. So, yes, we coordinate, we do that. The turnaround time, we think into the future, will be shorter and shorter. If you have a standby disaster management team in defense and in the municipalities, you actually press the button and it is gone. So we're not sure how fast we will be able to do, but we can assure this country we will not take a week, we will not take 48 hours before we deploy. Within our own planning as defense, we were planning in any case to start looking at rapid deployment for other things. Therefore, for disaster, it will be extra rapid. I think I have answered those that come to us. How much a disaster will cost cannot be compared to the cost to life. And therefore, we will be talking to Treasury around that. I do know that between themselves and COGTA, there is monies, but with us, we will want to make sure that we don't lose South African lives because there is shortage of money in this country. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Modise. Financing available, yes. There's always finance. Because in the appropriation, by the very nature of a disaster in a country getting itself ready for any other unknown disaster, it keeps reserves. They don't reside at COGTA, but COGTA then applies immediately after a disaster has happened. And this is why you were talking about the turnaround time, which is one of the reasons why we thought a collaboration with Minister Modise and other partners will be important for us to assist our municipalities. So in the example of Port St. John's, City of eThekwini, Nelson Mandela Bay, some 2-3 in the northwest during the floods of last year, about 4 provinces were affected, including Limpopo and Mpumalanga in your Nkomazi area around Malelane. So a municipality must then take out its technicians, technical people, technical experts, and assess if it's a road that has been damaged and costed, submit it to us for national treasure. You know, in most instances, Minister of Finance gets to be blamed, and we're like, we are ready, we're waiting for money. It takes too long on our side to place the report. And that is why such a collaboration today, because of the expertise that the reserves have, it will fasten our process and make it quicker for us to apply and receive the funds, but not only receive them. And sometimes you think the smaller the municipality, the Port St. John's, yes, it's inherent, maybe they are unable to attract skills, but for example, in eThekwini, Dr. Stole, we collectively, after the assessment was done, 1.5 billion was transferred to City of eThekwini. As of and rolled over 187 million from the previous disaster, which then got to be caught up by the next disaster. So ultimately, they were sitting with around 1.6 or so billion in their municipal account for disaster. As somewhere around March this year, they were at about 13%. Yes, in comparison to Buffalo City, Port St. John's, in terms of response and assessment, they will be much quicker because they've got engineers, they've got Buffalo City is small, we'll use MISA, we'll use the province and all that. Maybe it could take us, on average, we estimate about 14 days for the report to be submitted after things have quietened down. In some instances, water in particular takes time to, you find that the bridge is still submerged. You don't know how much the extent of the damage and all that. You will do that additional information. In the fires of the Northwest, for example, somewhere around December, January, they took around 8-9 days for the fire just to, and there's quite a lot of livestock that died. So already in your 14 days, 10 days have been taken by the disaster itself. You are on site, but you are mostly on search and rescue and quelling the disaster, and you are not necessarily on assessment. We try to do them jointly, but it depends on the type of a disaster that it is. But the intention for this is to make sure that we have expertise on hand. So they will be resident. Yes, as Minister Modise said, they are not full-time, but they are on call. When we receive a call from our disaster management in every province, and they are fully active, and they say there's fire in Rustenburg, they are ready to go with the reserves that we will be creating. So we're also going to make it mandatory that they go into the municipality. We don't wait for the municipality. And the Disaster Management Act is very clear that measures must be taken by government. COGTA in this instance must play a lead, collaborate, plan, direct, and resolve the issue. So the turnaround time, really, it is our problem. And that is why we are here this morning, to seek assistance also from our partners in government to be able to. It is never enough in funding, but to say that there isn't money allocated, we also will not be truthful to you. Money is allocated, but you may find, for example, in Alfred Duma municipality, your Lady Smith, those members of the media who went with us there, the damage was so huge that it actually is no longer a repair. You need to rebuild. So you then structure that financially, maybe in 3 financial years. Yes, you start with the immediate, that people are able to drive and cross over, attend to school, go to town and all that. 4 of the streets in the main city of Newcastle were wiped off. So it's not a rebuild there. It's you really have to start again. But there are measures, for example, which now teaches us on how to build in anticipation for disaster. So we're no longer doing things differently, and it sort of adds quite a bit. Duguza, for example, is a municipality that will permanently have floods just outside eThekwini if you follow the El Nino patterns. Ugu, your Port Shepstone area, will forever have that area. Alfred Duma will have, Amajuba will always have. Port St. John's, there's actually even a thought that the whole entire town must be relocated because of the position of where it is and the position of the rains. The Nkomazi area will always have areas of being submerged. Musina and the Kiani Malamulele areas will forever have challenges of floods. So if we know this information, it then means we need to be able to be acting differently with regard to planning and anticipating from an infrastructure point of view that we need to prevent the disasters, prevent the loss of life and all that. Other departments, yes, are part. They may not be here to sign because they are part of the disaster response. For example, your K9 teams from SAPS and all that. In each and every disaster, you need them from their various skills, either from wall climbing and all that to remove people who are trapped. And you always need a K9 SAPS team, which is forever part of the disaster management teams. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ministers. Do we perhaps have any other question? It's a follow-up. Okay.
Last question from me. So I just wanted to understand how involved are social services in the actual MOU. Whenever there's a disaster, people always run out of food. So in terms of social welfare assistance, how involved is that department? And is there any talk of maybe food parcels or any social support that people might get besides the technical disaster challenges? So in terms of immediately assisting people with the basics, whether it's food or clothes, how is the thought going, especially in this new structure?
Do we have any other question? Okay. Minister.
Okay. No, it's fine. Minister will also add. As I've indicated, this is a collaboration to deal with infrastructure, an element that is part of the disaster response strategy. Now, you have got what we all know as the National Disaster Management Center, which Dr. Stolle is heading. Each and every province, we call it NDMC, each and every province have a PDMC. In the PDMC, all disaster-related departments, Home Affairs, for example, if there's fire, documents will burn. If there's water, they will be wet, you may not use it. Department of Education, a school may be destroyed, or uniform of a learner, you know, books and all that. So the disaster center operates as is and continues. But if we can't rebuild a school faster and a bridge to go to school, people will stay longer in the community halls, which is what is a problem now. If you go into disaster areas, after search and rescue, we put them in community halls, they stay with other family members. The municipality must then rebuild the road and all that, which takes long for all the other departments. So DSD is obvious. They've got government funding for food parcels. They also have got partners that they work with. If you go to George, for example, the people are still in the hall. DSD is feeding them every day with food parcels, and we are responsible for rescue. We are responsible for the engineering part to hand over to Public Works to check was the department, the building compliant and all that. That is the technical part. Public Works is part of the disaster management center. So this does not change anything. It enhances. That is why I'm saying they are equally part of the disaster currently, but mainly in the search and rescue. You must have seen soldiers with their helicopters pulling and lifting people before even this collaboration was signed. That does not change. What do we want them to assist us with? We are saying we appreciate, we've got shortcomings. The Constitution compels us as COGTA on Section 154 to support municipalities to fulfill their obligations. One of the municipal obligations is to deal with disaster, receive the funding, and repair and take your life as a community member back to normal as much as it can and as fast as it can. If you assess just that block of infrastructure repairs, we are not doing well, precisely because municipalities with regard to infrastructure are struggling. Even metros. I mean, I made a metro is sitting with 1.5 billion in their kit. It's meant for disaster in the roads in Palito and bridges and all the way towards the airport as you pass the new airport and the part of the city of eThekwini. They are 13%. With the rollover of the past of about 187 million. So that's what we want this to assist us with. That if we have brought the army in a city of eThekwini and they are reserve, we possibly will not be sitting at 13%. So we're saying we need your skill, we appreciate we are weak. Come, government has got quite a lot of expertise. We can't be struggling to bring back the life of the people in the areas that are affected. They are not the only ones. Even Port St. John's, the road that connects from where we took the president, the money was allocated. Well, the contractor has only got into site, I think, somewhere around February or so. But it took longer for the process for the municipality to. The same with Nkomazi, many others. So this is what this is about today. Infrastructure, but it does not do away with all the disaster management activities that are supposed to be part of the disaster and joke and all that when the disaster happened. Thank you.
I just thought I should remind you that every soldier in the Defence Force does have a different occupation. So the Defence Force produces electricians, it produces builders, ironmongers, furniture makers, whatever. In the last disaster in KZN and the Eastern Cape, I actually tried to say, before you go for big contracts, which are civilian, which are going to absorb most of that money, consider coming to us to deploy our works formation. Minister, we have gadgets in defense. I have seen a little gadget that could tell you how deep the water was. And in other words, you do have equipment and people who are trained, who can deal with any disaster within your own defense and for their country. But also remember when we formed this National Defense Force, when Joe Modise was asked, what do you do with these many numbers in peace times? He said, communities have been deprived. There are no roads, there aren't enough houses. They can be used to do with infrastructure. And in fact, they are capable of doing that. So we're putting all skills at the disposal of communities that are in need. And sometimes all we ask for is, give us S&T as we are there, we will deploy our skills. And that is what defenses do in times of peace. Serve, not only protect the lives when they are threatened by other human beings, but when nature also threatens. So I think that we can safely say that there is also a vehicle. The vehicle we inherited from the old Defence Force, the South African Force Institution. It can be used, it was used in times of emergencies to do procurement. We're putting that SAFI at the disposal of disaster management in this country. We also think that if we go back to defense working with CSIR closer as it did in the past, we might actually be able to preempt more damages. We have a responsibility for, what do you call that? The Antarctica. We report as defense, as South Africa on the Antarctica. It means that any disaster, and that is why I deliberately said that we're now having to watch what is happening in the Southern Hemisphere. If anything happens at the Antarctica, South Africa must be ready to be the first on the spot, because it is our direct responsibility. The wherewithal to do that is what we have been screaming for. Enable us to be prepared to deal with any contingency as the Defence Force. But we are very happy about this partnership because it will enable us to make sure that land of the quality of life, people being able to know that the state has their back, whether it rains or whether it shines. It is what we want to say this cooperation today stands for. We are happy that Treasury is assuring us that they will do their best to avail all the necessary financial muscle we might need. As for the human capital, the 63,000 SADA full-time members have alternative skills. They are at the beck and call of the nation when the time needs them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ministers, and thank you very much, colleagues. We have reached the end of our program. I am going to request the Secretary of Defense to do a vote of thanks, Mam Kamet.
Ministers, thank you very much. Mine is just a straightforward task at the end of this briefing. On behalf of the ministers, Minister Nkadimeng and Minister Modise, I would like to thank all those who are here. You've made time to come to this briefing, but most importantly, the senior officials who were working on this memorandum of cooperation and who made sure that everything happened today. But this is, as ministers have indicated, we have been collaborating. What is important now is that we are firming up the collaboration during times of disasters. We want to be able to respond as soon as possible in a structured fashion. We will be from here as technocrats, look at the technical arrangements, at the protocols, and not that there were no protocols, but firming up the protocols and firming up the SOPs so that we all stand ready to respond when a disaster hits. Thank you very much. The members of the media, I shouldn't forget you because it's you who are carrying these messages for us. Thank you very much.
Voting.